video every week on a different person in their ministerial class, and they put it together themselves, and this one was on Thomas Trower. So just...
So all of them work together?
Yeah. Separately.
You'll see. And it was during...
I was ministerial class going, Clarice. Are you enjoying Troy? Do you hear him?
Yes. Apparently, he's okay. He's a little dry, and his sentences go on forever.
Oh, I know all about long sentences, Clarice. Perhaps a glass of Chianti will help him go down a little easier.
No thank you, and stop calling me Clarice.
Your problem is you need to get more joy out of life.
I think my problem is I need to graduate from ministerial ASAP. I'm losing it.
Remember, according to Troward, your only purpose is to enjoy life. Wake up to joy. No, really, wake up. You're dreaming.
I didn't know you were British.
That's the part you find odd.
You okay?
Yeah. It's the weirdest dream.
Like weird how?
Well, Lori was making a horror film about Troy's admonition that life is to be enjoyed. But it was your dog explaining it. It was kind of cool. But it ticked me off a little because I was going to do a video like it using the same quote.
That's insane. I mean, how can you talk about enjoying life without Troy's thoughts on interest? The secret to life is not solely the enjoyment of it, but your interest and your participation in it. He literally said, the secret to enjoying life is to take an interest in it. Oh, and by the way, you're still asleep. Is that why Sandy was in my video?
I don't know. It's your dream.
Hey, what are you waiting for? Go find something to enjoy.
We're going to stop after this one.
Judge Trower today. He is on a long sabbatical. Well, it's been said that in a court of law, only a fool would represent himself. Yet the truth is, we all represent ourselves all the time by means of our thoughts and beliefs. So the real question is, are you representing yourself foolishly? Judge Trower Court said that if we want to earn a new sentence, there must be no inversion in the individual's presentation of himself to the originating power. If we present ourselves invertedly as lacking or unworthy, such will be our sentence. My friends, you are hereby sentenced to a life beyond your wildest dreams, but you must believe it. So get to it, remembering who you are, representing yourself from that truth, and living the life of your dreams. Your case is closed.
Is that a garbage bag?
I'll stop right now. Shall I stop? Because you have to get on. But if we have time at the end, you can watch the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's getting creative with Trevor, yeah.
It does make it clear. So they all did their own and then somebody put it together?
Yeah, I guess, they had.
Well, they were doing it
they're
during
all
COVID, so.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so, let's, chapter 1. What'd you guys think? This is an open discussion for chapter 1.
Can we just talk about it?
Yeah, a little bit. Hey, you got anything else? I mean, I had, let me just look at my little book.
Plant.
Read chapter 1 stuff.
Okay.
With the quote that you already had said earlier, are we gonna do mics on this, or are we just
Yeah.
gonna have open?
We are gonna do that.
Where's
But
the mic? Over my side.
we're just gonna pass around like we do, just for chapter 1, because everybody.
Who's got chapter 1?
Are you gonna say something about chapter 1?
Everybody's reading
Everybody
it.
had chapter 1.
Were you gonna say something about chapter 1?
Yeah.
Just pass it around.
Cool. I thought that the quote that you had earlier with the example of the airplane, with the airplane and everything had already existed before, but we had to have it all come into order, was absolutely brilliant. So everything that we have with all our dreams can come true if we believe in that dream and have that desire and feel it from the quantum level, of course, and it's within us, and all we have to do is, become that person and put everything in order for that dream to manifest within itself.
Because everything is, there's more of an order than we think is going on, correct?
Of course.
Yeah.
The universe unfolds perfectly, and that with us controlling our universes, that's more prominent, I guess, within our lives that we would know, as long as we have that clear vision in mind.
Absolutely, and we always think that chaos isn't really chaos, it's only chaos to us, correct?
Yeah.
Nature lets us know that. Nature, it looks like there's a whole chaos going on, but it's actually what? Rearranging? It's actually rearranging things that we look at as disaster, and in our own lives we're rearranging too. But what happens is we don't always trust our nature of who we are. Anyone else have anything? Oh, did you? It's okay. Anyone else got anything that you underline? I would read some of mine, except for the fact that I don't have my glasses, so I can't read out of the book. Oh.
Thanks.
There you go.
I did have a bunch of things underlined, but I wanted to just point out one thing that I was struggling with recently. I've been reading a lot of Deepak Chopra. He's doing his new MetaHuman book, and then I can't remember the other man's name, another scientist and a professor, who are saying that there is no material matter at all. Like, we see stuff because we look at it. When we look away, it goes away. When we look back, it's there. And this concept of, like, absolutely nothing is constructed in the material world unless we're looking at it, to me is a huge jump from the idea of, as the observers, we are participants. We are causing something to happen by observing. Feels very different, which has been scientifically proven. It feels extremely different from the idea that absolutely nothing is real. And so I actually liked, because I'm embarrassed to say that I enjoyed reading Troward. And I was confused, I guess, because, I mean, I actually enjoyed it more than I thought. I think that part of the reason is I was sitting up reading instead of, usually I'm laying in bed and then it's just like, done.
It's like Rita
a
watching a
sentence.
movie, right? If you lay down, you're going to fall
over.
asleep.
But to my point. So he says another theory is that matter has no existence at all, but is merely an illusion projected by our own minds. If so, then how is it that we all project identical, similar images? And then he goes on from there, extensively proving that point. I won't read it all, and I was really happy to read that. I think these new ideas that are coming out now, or I don't know if they're that new, they're new to me, is a little bit of a jump for me. So I actually enjoyed, because I found Troward reassuring in the way that he wanted to prove everything. He said, well, this is true because of this, which is also why I love Ernest Holmes. And so reading this, I thought, okay, I liked that. I felt like I can trust this guy. I like what he's saying. So.
And I like it that he's breaking it down. He breaks it down. He continues to break it down. It's not just good enough. Well, make a statement about it. Then he goes in and breaks it down again. Right. And he breaks it down. And I think it's what Jamie was saying. It's all about his background too, because as the observer, as the judge, it is up to you, if you're a good judge and you're actually doing the job of that, to see and observe what is going on from both sides, and so that you can make a decision on that. It reminded me of when you were first bringing this up, is when we were kids. Remember, like when we thought that it disappeared if we weren't there? I mean, I remember other kids saying that. They go, it's kind of like when you leave, your mom doesn't exist until you see her again. Yeah.
Which is not hide and seek, when kids play hide and seek and they cover their eyes because they think if I can't see you, you can't see me.
Exactly. It's so cool. Anything else on chapter 1? Anything you underline? Yeah.
I underline a bunch, but
thank you.
That it's all originating power must be in essence unity, and in manifestation multiplicity, and that it manifests as life and beauty through the unerring adaptation of means to ends. So the all originating power is unity, and it manifests as multiplicity. So that it's not just by itself.
So it comes from.
Yes.
Therefore, everything we see is coming from that. Coming from that. Orders heaven's first law. Anyone else for chapter 1? Peggy, did you get anything? DJ, going once, going twice. Alrighty. So. Come on up, Melissa. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa Troward.
Okay, so this is the self-contemplation of spirit. So what he says is the cosmos came into existence by the self-contemplation of spirit. So cosmic energy is fueled by spirit, which started the condensation of ether, which is, I thought this was fascinating. He said that ether is composed of many different chemical elements. So like carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. And when the book was published in 1915, there was only 70 chemical elements. And as of 2019, there's 118. I did a little research. And he said the only difference between the elements is the number of etheric particles and the rate of motion within them. So it's how many particles and how fast they're moving, which that's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he poses this question: how did this universal substance get there? He reasoned that there must have been some source that wasn't material in nature, because that's the only thing that could create matter. And the only thing that actually could create matter is thought, which came from originating mind contemplating itself. So there's no time or space at this point, only present absolute being. However, spirit is universal and eternal, and paradoxically present throughout all time and space. Like I said, so figure that out. So he says that all began with spirit contemplating itself as being. But in order to realize your being, you've got to be conscious. Mm-hmm. And you can only be conscious in relation to something else. And if you're conscious of nothing, then you're unconscious. Spirit of life must feel alive. To feel alive, it must be conscious and have something to be conscious of outside of itself, kind of like, looking at this. I mean, you have to be able to see a separation between you and it. So spirit is alive everywhere, and it recognizes ether. He also calls this the primary substance, with all the particles in perfect equilibrium. So he's being, and you got the ether, and they're all just in equilibrium. So it's all pretty static. Ether is projected by spirit as a consequence of spirit's own aliveness, establishing the great primary polarity of being. Okay, so now we've got polarities, opposites, the relationship between opposites. And without this, you wouldn't ever have motion. You wouldn't have any external motion at all. So the polarity is the interaction of active and passive, and is the basis of all evolution, which evolution is the unfolding of the potentiality in things that have already been created. So as you've got these things created, they unfold, and they keep unfolding. Okay, and then he brings in circulation, which depends on polarity and the flow of energy between the opposite poles. So, like a battery, you've got the positive and the negative, and it flows, and that creates the spark, the energy for the car to run. Circulation is the manifestation of life, which depends on polarity. So life manifests, circulation and manifests life, and the polarity helps it to move forward. And he says the two great connective polarities are soul and body, and soul and spirit. All right. So then he moves on to the creative order. And he said, okay, it can be generalized as spirit wants to enjoy its life. And by self-contemplation, it projects a polar opposite from which the enjoyment of self-consciousness will spring. So it's self-contemplating, and it's projecting the opposite of self-contemplating into self-consciousness. Spirit enjoys life, and by thinking it has enjoyment, it produces the conditions to bring this about. Each sensation becomes a fresh starting point for more action, and each stage becomes the stepping stone to higher degrees of life enjoyment. This is a limitless progression of the one creative process, which is endless and based on the singleness of the originating power. Creative power is limitless and strictly progressive, proceeding stage by stage as preparation one for another. So once it's going, it's kind of like an eternal emotion. It's it's like it just keeps moving forward. The foundation fact is I am consciousness, from which follows the desire for activity. Spirit says, I want to enjoy my amness by doing something with it. Spirit is now conceiving of itself as activity, and the corresponding material is motion, as opposed to diffused ether, which is just awareness of being, like just sort of being static in space. Spirit goes from being to self-sustained activity. And so it shows up in the physical world of a vacuum, which if you go out into space, it is a vacuum, as rotary motion. So like the planets are round. Everything is going like this so that the planets become round, and they're going around a sun, and they're spinning around on their axis. Atoms are the same way. So everything is rotary. So the two ultimate units of physical manifestation are the atom and the planet, because they both follow the same law of self-sustained motion, expressing the primary activity of spirit, which is rotary motion. I don't know. Okay. But spirit wants more than mechanical motion. The first step in individualized consciousness is plant life, followed by animal life, and then humans. where the liberty of seeking its own conditions is immensely expanded, because we can think and do. At this point, spirit's expression manifests as intellectual man, or the fourth great stage of spirit's self-recognition. But the creative process doesn't stop here. Spirit's word is excelsior, which means ever life, life more abundant. So there are 4 known kingdoms. What is the 5th? According to Troward, progress has been made towards the development of more perfect individuality. To move forward, we need to look for principle we haven't yet experienced. And the only place to find it is in the originating spirit. So, we are personally participating in the divine ideal by which the only principle we can advance to is the next stage. And we arrive at the question, what is the divine ideal like? Chapter 3.
Yay.
I don't know if you were able to absorb any of that, but it was like...
That's great. That's perfect.
I mean, it's very logical, but
Yeah.
he just throws all these other things in there. It's kind of like, well, where did that come from?
Well, you seem to understand it too, so that you seem to understand it
Oh,
too.
good,
So
thank
that's the great.
Except for when I'm listening.
Were you
I had
all?
to take a
She
lot
was
of
all
notes.
nervous. She was going. Are they thinking the same way
I
of me
did.
as they did Trevor? And those? No, it was
I
great.
mean,
It was
I
great.
did have to, take notes. And
That's great. You made it very clear. Who's chapter 3?
oh, sure. Sure,
But
what the
we
heck?
do have 10 chapters, so only one.
Well, I guess it's well, there's 4 so far, and then said the 5th. Animal. Well, so it'd be plant, animal, maybe mineral, and humans. And humans. Well, mineral
Mineral,
would be
yeah, well,
the first thing. I mean,
yeah.
planets are mineral. So it'd be mineral, animal, mineral, plant, animal, humans. And then he said, what is the 5th? He was questioning it. We don't know. The 5th kingdom.
There you go. Thank you very much. Who's got number 3?
3.
Was that Emma?
Uh-oh.
It's okay. Emma will have to do it next week. I just want to.
Who's got?
I have mine. No, that's Sue Wood.
Oh, but she said she sent her thing in.
Yeah, she did. Rita is going to be playing the part of Sue Wood tonight.
Explain it.
This is great. Thank you, Melissa.
This is what she wrote. You want this?
Yeah. Rita?
What? I have to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even read this yet.
Okay. The Divine Ideal
By Sue Wood.
by Sue Wood. The nature of principle is to open up and lead us on, showing us things we could not otherwise have seen. Principle is not a set of rules, but a revealing of unlimited possibilities. Chapter 3, I thought you said it was chapter 2.
Whoop, 3.
Oh, 2. Oh, you did 2. That's right. Chapter 3 speaks of principles as our way of understanding originating spirit. 2 essential principles which were discussed in the previous chapter are God's power of selection and its power of initiative from the ether, which is everywhere present. Spirit chooses and causes its physical manifestation. That makes sense. The question of why spirit would create rather than just self-contemplate is principle 3, the desire of living for ever-increasing enjoyment of life. Principle 4, the law of continuous progression says spirit's enjoyment of life must have a corresponding fact and manifestation to answer. The 5th principle is spirit's recognition of itself as the source of all things, the principle by which he himself comes into existence and recognizes his own artistic ability. This principle is the relationship between the universal manifesting principle and its individual manifestation, which is always harmonious with itself. Spirit is perpetually and ceaselessly creating. This continual forward movement is what we call evolution. The chapter concludes reminding us that we must recognize that our life is identical with that of spirit, included in and forming part of the great life. We are not merely a member of a generic race, but a special, direct creation living directly from the originating life spirit. When we are in harmony with the laws of truth, life, and beauty, we can trust ourselves, knowing Spirit is influencing our thoughts and creating through us. So the oneness with Spirit is the divine ideal, or the Christ consciousness.
That's great. Yeah, very good. Thank you. The understudy for Sue Wood, you did a lovely job. Thank you.
Haircut, but it's okay.
No, thank you. So this is going to be very succinct. Thank you, everybody who has gone before me. Chapter 4 is the manifestation of the life principle. Troward concludes the chapter speaking about the old law being the manifestation of the principle of life working under constricted conditions. Oh, yes, sorry. Working under constricted conditions. And the new law, or what we're working towards, is the life principle working under expanded conditions. So what I got from this chapter was the saying, life does unto you as you believe. Sorry. That life becomes what you believe it to be. So he starts off the chapter talking about matter, and that form is a necessity for the manifestation of life, but not just a particular form. He goes into what seems like the evolution of our thinking is that eventually we'll become beings who can live on any planet and in any existence, that we will just become so unified with the Spirit, which is everywhere, that we will be able to transfer our being from one planet to another and materialize in a way that's harmonious to whatever the environment is. And that right now, that's not where we're at, and that's not really what we're focusing on. But that's like eventually what the evolution of spirit is supposed to become. He talks about quite a few principles in the chapter. The order is heaven's first law comes in this chapter as well, talking about when we realize the true order of things, that's how we'll be able to unlock this ability to transfer our being from one plane of existence to another, or one planet to another. And the more that we realize our unity with the whole, and that because everything is made up from this one spirit, it's that like that it has to be that we can do this. Then, so after he talks about form, he talks about the law of creative process, continues to talk about this in the chapter, and reaffirms that life principle is self-recognizing and is always in harmony with wherever our life manifests. And so after he talks about this idea of being able to project everywhere, then he goes into the idea that the all-embracing unity of the Spirit is the foundation of all things. That was one thing that I really, that really stood out for me from the chapter. So that's basically, once we realize that we are in unity with the Spirit and with this thing that is everywhere and is within everything, that is the foundation that will create our ability to unlock this principle. The other quote, principle is not bound by precedent, comes into play here. So he starts on where we want to be and then kind of goes into where we're at. That we are limited by the belief that it wasn't done before, but if we continue to believe that what happened in the past is the only possibility of what's going to go forward, we'll never evolve. And then he also quotes that it's obvious that that's not the case with aeronautics and the fact that people couldn't fly, and that now that people can fly in many different capacities. So it's got to be that we will be able to evolve as beings. He reaffirms this one originating power, the principle of all in one power, one spirit, and that, like Ernest Holmes, and what I kept hearing is that unity really is the unlocking power of our power as a being, and that we really are the only limitation, and our belief in the limitations are the only thing that's holding us back. that we so firmly believe in the material, and that the things that we can see and feel and touch and hear are what's going to be possible, that we can't contemplate the infinite ability or the infiniteness that is spirit, and that really is our power as we are one being with that. He goes on to say, so what you contemplate becomes the law of your being. And he goes on, he also talks about the law of reciprocity and the law of life and the law of growth, and talks about how he distinguishes this law of growth as, it's kind of like how Dr. Holmes talks about, soul and spirit, and he kind of defines the law of being, or the one as the all. And then we have the law of life, which is when we speak our word, we put that into the universe. And then the law of growth is the vehicle. He talks about vehicles and how our word becomes law through these vehicles, which are principles. And he talks about spirits as formless, spirit of life, and then, and distinguishes between spirit and principle. So principle is the form from which that spirit sorry, I wrote a scribble. I'm very sorry. from when principle forms. Yes. Correct. Right, exactly. So for spirit manifests, basically spirit manifests through principle. And it really depends on how much energy is put into this process. So it starts off with principle, and depending if you're putting lots of energy, like lots of spiritual energy or low spiritual energy, will create a growth. And that growth will then be manifested in form as the individualized spirit. So I likened it to our process of being. So if we believe, so we start off with spirit, and this principle of the law of life and the principle of life. And we believe that we are of a high spirit, or we're of high spiritual power, then that will create a vehicle that creates a massive growth, and you get an individualized being that is bright and vibrant and is a great manifester. But if you believe that you are of low energy and you're not connected with the great spirit, then you will manifest an individualized being that is stuck in form and that can only see and create from the matter within versus everything into the cosmos. So in summation, the chapter talks about manifestation and the general principle of life, and that beings, or how we conceptualize it, is the localization of the power of the spirit. And then we principle or growth are the vehicles that allow, like soul, the projection of the individual to come into form. And then the form is the individualized spirit. Yeah.
No, and you're talking the creative process.
Yeah.
And you're also talking that he didn't mention, but what we call duality. It's the duality that's keeping us from our power because of the condition, because we're looking at conditions as the first cause. And so as we look out there, just like you're saying, beautifully put, because it was so clear.
He does speak a little bit about the duality that did come up in the chapter. I'm sorry I didn't touch on that, but he touches on it more as a not that he doesn't say the word illusion, but that it really is all one. Everything is one. We just see it as separate, or that
And you also brought up the degree
Yes.
in which we
And that's when thank you for bringing, that's where instead of, we see it as two separate, but he sees it as it's a degree of like is high power or low power versus
Exactly.
light and dark.
And that's when Ernest Holmes, obviously got it again from Troward, said there'll come a time when we can sit here and we could be in LA right now and then still be here at the same time. And Ernest Holmes brings that up, is that when we get to know that we are not, exactly beautifully put that you were talking about, that we are one with it, then we will only know how to transform ourselves, not even with a lot of energy, just go, oh, I want to go to LA right now, I need to go. And then you're...
And he even talks about it in planetary, like you
Right.
could be, I want to, or I recollect that I am on Jupiter, and your
Right.
body would, or your form, your individualized spirit will manifest itself in the perfect way to survive on that planet.
That's great. Thank you, Jamie. That's great.
I was
Give
going
it
to
up for
say,
Jamie.
there are people that can do that already.
Right.
Yogis that
Yeah,
can do
that's
that.
true.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
the book, I haven't read the book wholly through, but I'm going to, because it's been mentioned to me several times. The Masters of the Far East.
Right.
The very first part of that book is about people that can actually do that. So there are people walking this earth that can do that, transport themselves from one place.
And we watched the movie. I forgot what it was. It wasn't a documentary, but the movie where he went ahead of himself and he was already there before. It was the one. Never mind. No. This was another one. I believe it is. Charles is up now. Is this true?
Can I just say something?
Yes. No.
Jamie, it was great. You made me want to read that chapter.
Oh. Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Maybe Emma has 5?
Yeah, she does.
I just wanted to say that Jamie made me want to read that chapter. So, in my chapter, which I didn't go into the duality, it says that duality is limiting. It limits the members so that the end would be reached before anything was begun. So, like the duality actually, other than a unity, duality just freezes everything.
And like you talked about the polarities, right? From each side, they're really the same. I mean, two different. Exactly. I always say that insanity, another definition of insanity is duality, because you can only have those insane, like when I worked with my dad, and my dad had all these, but that was just because of his separateness, his duality that he had, and they were created into other personalities. So interesting. Hello, Charles. We're skipping the personal factor that we've already touched a little bit. We're going right into the standard of personality with Charles Wolford.
Yes. Chapter 6, the standard of personality. And it kind of reminded me of a story of two types of people. You have the Charles that lived in Cincinnati, graduating into college and moving down to Southern Kentucky. And then you have the Charles that moved to Kauai and started going to Center for Spiritual Living and started interacting more with the spirit. So therefore, you have the more generic Charles that was falling more into the law of averages and, going upon the things that he saw around him and never could really dream more than what the society had already told him. And then you had the Charles that was going under the teachings of Ernest Holmes with the conduits of Rev Rita and Rev Patrick, and seeing of how I can build upon my dreams due to spirit. And so why is chapter 6, the standard of personality, so important? It was pretty much told in the very first paragraph. And what Troward had said is the moving power in the creative process in which we study right here in the science of mind. So once again, the moving power in the creative process is the self-contemplation of spirit. And if we also see that, because we are miniature reproductions of the original spirit, we are miniature reproductions of first cause. In fact, we are first cause. So right away, he addresses that, boom, we are first cause, and that our contemplation, our self-contemplation, what we can kind of see in our minds, or we can contemplate kind of dreaming and having that vision of something, it affects the creative spirit, and it is manifested through the original spirit, which is first cause. And it says that our process for developing power is to contemplate that originating spirit. So our process for developing power is to contemplate first cause, is to have the vision through first cause as the source of the power we want to develop. Boom, right there hits me in the face with some great knowledge. And also, it kind of gives a flip of the coin, though. It says we are, in the very next paragraph, it says, and here we must guard against a mistake which people often make when looking to the spirit as the source of power. We are apt to regard it as sometimes giving and sometimes withholding power. So it's kind of like that conditional love, or that conditional power that we have sometimes. Oh, I run upon some hard time, so obviously I don't have the power that I thought I had from first cause, and we start to get that doubt, and then that's when we can go down a downward. Then we can go through a downward spiral. And he continues on and says, and consequently are never sure which way it will act. This is the most powerful part, though, about all of that. But by doing so, we make spirit contemplate itself as having no definite action at all, as a plus and minus which mutually cancel each other, and therefore, by the law of creative process, no result is to be expected. So it's through so back to the old Charles. The old Charles thought of prayer, and he thought of himself as someone that was favored, if you will. And I would have run into this favor, and I thought I had this great connection with God. But then when hard times came, I went into a why me. Oh, why did this happen? And obviously, I mean, I'm just nobody, and I'm going to get what I get, and I'm just going right again, falling into that law of averages. But that new Charles that was started, developing under the Center for Spiritual Living, he started to see as this creative process is always within me through first cause, and therefore I can manifest the life that I've always dreamed. But if I fall into that, I'm out of touch with source, then it will never get anything that I ever desire. So there has to be no doubt about your vision and what you can manifest through the power of first cause. So that's why this is so important, because it teaches you says to you right away, you got to believe in first cause. You got to believe in first cause and what you can do as a person, as a individual person that is connected to first cause through the creative process. So what can we do? Or I'm sorry, what is the normal standard of personality? He says the normal standard of personality is found to be itself the law of the creative process, working at the personal level, and it cannot be subject to limitation for the simple reason that the process being that of the self-contemplation of spirit, no limit can possibly be assigned to this contemplation. So once you get in touch with that first thing, now something that always has just inspired me about the Center for Spiritual Living is there was this first cause that has expanded out so much that now we have galaxies in this vast universe that has stars upon stars that probably have planets around them, and all of that power is there within us. So there will be no doubt about how much we can have within us and what we can create, because if we are part of that first cause, then damn it, all of that energy is a conduit of this human form, and therefore we can manifest whatever the hell we want, whatever we want. And we need so this is the how. All right, so we're going over the why, and this is the what. To believe that all of this, all of so Dr. Joe Dispenza says that we're made of matter and energy, and all of this, the whole universe is made of matter and energy, and that is within us, and we are part of that first cause. So how do we start to use this being within us? Well, we need, therefore, never be afraid of forming too high an idea of human possibilities. So that old Charles would have been like, you can only be so rich. You can only have so many friends. You can only be loved so much. But this new Charles knows that there is an abundance, a limitless abundance of everything I could ever want and ever have in my life. It goes on to say, provided always that we take the standards as the foundation on which we build up the edifice of our personality. So, and it goes right back to it to say that one of the last sentences that goes on forever, of course, that only we must never forget the difference between these two statements of the universal law. The one is cosmic and generic, common to the whole race, whether they know it or not. So it's upon us, it's upon you, it's upon me to individually determine on whether we are first cause or not. And it's the most important part. Like you were just saying right here, it's the most important part of a treatment. Is just noticing that there is the divine and that we are that. And once we get to that place, then when we know something, then damn it, we know it. And we can just go from there and trust that it's going to manifest right there in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Very clear. Thank you. Ron.
How did you read it, Ron? Were you able to do it?
He's just going to give us a little tidbit. He got it. He's just going to give us a little bit because he's one of his sight, and plus he just, plus his.
Yeah, I go to sleep when I sit for a long period of time. That's why I kind of like to stand up and walk around in the back.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I was chosen to look at race thought and new thought, which is very applicable to my life. So to begin with, I kind of see race thought as the masses. Maybe the way I was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And the belief system that I came with, which is the environment that I grew up in. And I have, over the last 25 or 30 years, been introduced to new thought. So what is new thought? Well, he says new thought is new life, is the newness. So from a kind of a really far out perspective, looking back here at the universe, we're developing and growing from a perspective of the physical, the reality, to the potential, to this new thought, this newness. And that's how, over a period of time, we have developed. And the basic concept is that we can't see those changes on a daily basis. We can't see what's happening as through the consecutive nows. What we get to see, though, is when we review or look back, we see a major change happening over a period of time. So he starts out with a couple of things that there's a lot of comparison. The comparison is that reality, the kind of place that we're coming from, and it's from the physical to this, as I've heard before, the cosmic, this universe. So our perspective has really widened. So that in that process, that evolutionary process, that's where we get this new thought. And it is an individual experience. So there's a race consciousness of all of us, but we all are part of that, and we are individuals. So we are the ones that are actually changing, developing. Now he goes and kind of compares this metaphysics, is the word he uses, but it's the spirituality that we're looking at or growing into, to the physical. It's more than the physical. It's more than just being alive and existing moment to moment. There's a lot of, he uses a lot of the comparisons. So we're comparing race thought to new thought. We're comparing life to death. So death is that part of the reality. But it really isn't that. When you look deeper into it, you'll see that it's really life. The life is that newness, that new thought. And there was a section back here that really caught my attention. Of all the sections here, he talks about this new fact, which is an individual experience, which is this growth process. And that's the reason that he's even talking about it, or we're even experiencing this. And he's using the words of, like, it's an intellectual perception. So that means it's up here. It's not that physical reality. It's not flesh and bones. And then he says, that's the real nature of the creative process. And then he says there's a divine spirit. And he mentions that the divine spirit is that life, love, and beauty, which actually support or underlie this new thought, this new consciousness. And that's kind of the way I see my personal life moving. It fits right into this. And one of the things that I really got out of this was that in this section, it was short, but it was easier for me to understand. I could see his logic. He would take me from the reality, the physical, and I could understand and agree and with this concept of, oh, that's a change. Oh, that makes sense. That's been my life experience. So this is I come from the background, I'm actually a math major. So this actually worked for me, as opposed, but it also took me, not this chapter, but it also took me a long time to understand his concept of moving from point to point. His process was a developmental process, and that's what he was trying to give to us so that we could use it personally.
Great, that's great. Yeah, just leave it there, that's fine. Thanks, Ron, that was good throwing up at the kind of last minute for you today. Peggy?
Oh, yes. Oh, and I think I want to stand around.
Yeah.
You can stand up now.
Thank you.
I have chapter 8, denouement of the creative process. And just as what has been shared already, the universal spirit evolves into the universal substance. When we examine the beliefs or motives that we have, so the self-contemplation, we progress and we continually ascend on a scale till we reach a level that the consciousness selection and the initiative that we use as an individual helps us to reach to where we want to be. We're all unique and special in our own way, and we all process creativity differently. The law of life includes the body, the human body, and it also includes the subjective and the objective mind. That is how the human, as we know ourselves at, is created, all of those components. We are formed to express our individuality and we process it all differently. Substance is necessary for the expression of the Spirit. And he refers to a piece of paper, like we're a piece of paper. If you fold it a certain way, you can make it a plane and fly it across the room. But if you take that same piece of paper and you fold it into a boat, it'll float on water. So it's still a piece of paper, but it has so much uniqueness, as we all do. A lot of these points have been covered already, but the eternal life is an immortal body, and that really is the logical denouement of our evolution. That really is. The immortal body is not necessarily a human body. It can be just a body of condensed light. The fact that we can go to other planets, I found quite, I didn't know what to say. I'm like, say what? I mean, that really kind of blew my mind to think that he had that concept at that time. But the internal body, that is a body of condensed light, could certainly travel to other worlds. To remain in the subjective light, it has to be in the flesh. But there are two kinds of people that they talk about. Those are that dream as they will, and these are people that are really enlightened bodies or enlightened souls. And those are the dream as they must, and those are race-conscious people. And he does talk about when you go through a physical death, you withdraw from the life force and you lose your objective consciousness. So you cannot reason in the same way as when you have both of those subjective and the objective conscious working together. So when people pass from this life force, the people that are race conscious people, they feel like they may go to a place that they may have learned from theology, that they may go to a place of heaven or another existence. But Thomas feels that these people they withdraw and they only have their subjective consciousness and they go into individual spheres. I thought that was kind of interesting because here I thought was like, theology is like you go to the place, the pearly gates, the high five, there's my friends, yeah? And it's not like that at all. It was kind of really kind of different. It requires initiative that is the power that introduces an entirely new element in the process of creation. And all individuals must use initiative to build up the superstructure of our individuality. And every step of advance depends on our personal development of power to take that step. The theology always believes about, I don't know if I would say duality, but that there is a place that you go, the heaven, the hell, that kind of thing. But Thomas talks about that death is not the will of God. It's just our race belief that it is a necessary part of us to die, just as nature does. And internal will and the nature of God is life itself.
Wow. That's great. It brings a whole nother thing to death, right? Ron, you're up. Yeah? Oh my God, Peggy, that. Yeah, exactly.
Very well done, class. Very well.
Thank you.
In conclusion,
you guys, we'll do it after because we have a little bit of time, so I want to make sure we get them all in.
So I got the chapter on the conclusion, and I'd like to thank all my classmates for everything that you guys shared. And so I'm not going to go over all of the same stuff that you shared because that's redundant. But my understanding of what I read is quite simply what we've been saying for all the time that I've been here at CSL, is that there's a power for good, there's a power for change, and I have the ability to use it. I mean, it's there for me. But I also have to be aware of the law of reciprocity. That's a big one. because it's basically what I put out is what's gonna manifest back to me. And I have to be careful because there are those times when I'm not very conscious of what I'm thinking, and that's what he refers to as the inversion. So that's my inverted consciousness, which goes back to my race consciousness, which goes back to all the things I've been taught and learned and believe about myself that are so deeply buried inside of me that they just pop up like weeds when I'm not really consciously focused. But when I'm focused, pretty much like what Michelle and I did from bankruptcy to abundance, we were focused on a goal of what we wanted our life to be aside from what it had been. And we knew that we could get out of where we were to get into where we needed to be. And so when we focused our consciousness with the energy that this is no longer acceptable, the way that we are living is just not acceptable, we won't live this way anymore, we were able to channel that energy, channel that consciousness to bring about the result that we wanted. That spirit says, hey, you can have it, but you gotta want it. But you gotta want it more than, it's not a wish. So we really have to put some energy into it. So I must embody that power into myself as if it is my second skin. It's more than my second skin. It's my inner being. I have to embody that, and I have to embody that 24 hours a day. It's not like, going to work. I'm just going to do it for 8 hours, and then after work, I'm going to chill and watch some TV and, play some Donkey Kong or whatever. I have to stay in that mindset 24/7, because when I stop focusing my energy, the manifestation stops. It goes on hold. It's on hold until I pick it up again. But when I pick it up again, it's like starting from square one. I'm not starting where I left off. I'm starting at square one. I got to start all over again. It's kind of like the book, The Abundance Plan. Do it for 40 days. If you don't make it to the 40 days and you stop, you have to start from day one. You don't start from, like, I stopped at day 16. Okay, I just pick it up at 17. No, I got to go back to step one, go back to day one and start that whole energy process again, because it builds on itself. And so, but it has to be in harmony with universal mind. It has to be in harmony. It cannot create any harm or take away from anybody else. So it has to be in harmony. So like what Ron just said, love and peace, those principles, the principles of spirit, has to be embodied in me when I'm manifesting what I want. And I can't take from anybody else. It can't hurt anybody else. And like I said before, it can be used constructively or it can be used destructively. And that's where I have to be principled on, okay, so the things that I want to manifest, how are they going to affect people around me? Are they going to be affected or infected? So I want to affect people. I don't want to infect anyone. So I'm using my creative energy, my spirit energy for positiveness. And I want to be an effective person through my life. And that's my summary.
Good, DJ. Let's have a couple more, and then we're free from Trower. What's that? I know, it's okay. We're going to finish. We're not going to stop now. Go all the way, baby.
Okay, so he wrote the book, and that everything that you guys had was part of the book, and that this chapter 10 is a totally separate thing that he decided to put in there after he edited it, so it's not part of that, and it's very different. And even though I have kind of a history of church and Bible study and all that kind of stuff for many, many years, I have to be honest with you, I couldn't quite get the whole logic of what he was trying to explain. But what he said at the end was, what I hope I have in some measure made clear is that there is a reason why Christ should be manifested and should suffer and rise again, and that so far from being a baseless superstition, the reconciling of the world to God through the one offering, which is capitalized, so I think he's talking about Christ, through Christ, once for all, offer to take care of all the sins in the world, lays the immovable foundation upon which we may build securely for all the illimitable future. So then he goes on to say things like he believed that the purpose of the Bible is to bring us freedom by helping us produce desired results. Okay, that's cool. He does, to me, I never got where I came up, how, I don't get the connection, but I heard him say it. And he said that the Bible, the divine ideal, which he capitalized, so I interpreted that to mean God, and the divine sacrifice, also capitalized, so I interpreted that to mean Christ, are intimately interwoven. But the folks of his time, who, was in his culture was a very Christian culture, tried to discard the divine sacrifice, Christ, as unphilosophical and not connected with cause and effect. And he believed it was not contrary to the law, but proceeds from the very nature of the law itself. What exactly he means by that, I'm not really sure. These same folks that he was talking about think that God would not require sacrifice because God is only a blind force, or God is love. And I got to get that other Thomas's book, because this whole chapter, I have to say.
It's okay, just tell us what you got.
Well, I'm just saying, I just didn't get a whole lot. I was trying to really, I don't understand how he would say something like this, but, somehow he believed that that somehow, he was trying to defend how why love would create a sacrifice. Like, if God is love, why would he make a sacrifice? And he said that God didn't demand the sacrifice, that man
Exactly.
Needed the sacrifice. And then he goes on to say that it's the instinctive cravings of humans for certainty that requires a demonstration so convincing as to leave no room for doubt of our perfectly happy relationship to God and all that flows from God consequently. And so it's God's greatest work to give us that, to help us to know for sure that basically we're all good with God. Didn't exactly use that term. But he spoke about how we did idolatry and then sacrifices, like with lambs, but that we needed to have this certainty that there is no separation between us and God because of sin, and that the whole purpose of the Bible is to lead us to the assurance that we're not separated from God because of sin, and that that's why he said there was one main sacrifice, Jesus' death, that takes away the sin for all time, even the past sins, that came before it. And then he also had something to say about the love in essence and beauty in manifestation. No idea what he meant by that. And that we can only live from the standpoint of our own consciousness. And that law and personality are the two pillars of the universe. I don't know. Like I said, I tried.
No, you're making sense. I don't know why you're disputing it because.
Well, what does he mean by that? I say the word, but I don't know what.
Well,
do you mean
no,
with
because
the
you were
law
just
and personality?
DJ, come back. What I'm saying is that your only job was to bring us the chapter. It wasn't to make complete sense out of it. It's because it's not going to make sense. But because of that, is that going to make sense if it doesn't make sense to you? So what we're going to do is we're going to open next week with that, and I would suggest everybody just take a little glimpse at this additional chapter that he decided to bring in. I thought you made some really good points, especially the fact that we create suffering. We create suffering. We created the crucifixion. We create all of this stuff. Spirit never has. We did. So that's what I got out of what you were saying. I went, wow.
I like it better what you're saying.
But that's the one thing I jumped on when you said that. I said, we're the suffering. We chose the suffering. So thank you. Thank you for that. Gina? There we go. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So I want us to really look at it because I think there's some stuff in there that she was pulling out that really is good. Good. Thank you, DJ.
I'll be quick. I'm actually going to lead up on what DJ was saying, or how Patrick was interpreting it. Is that in this chapter? So it's this 11th chapter that did make more sense than your chapter. I don't envy what you did. So he's talking about how everything in the world that is giving us trouble or difficulties, man created it because we have a lower mentality, and that we needed to create an opposite because we couldn't just accept that there is only one thing and it's all good and it's all love. So we actually fabricated fear. It all began with fear, which makes perfect sense because we've talked about in this room many times how the opposite of love is in fact fear. And everything else comes out of fear, right? So we fabricated fear because of our need for this, and that fear does not have to exist. It actually doesn't exist. And that we know this, or he was saying, because love is eternal and fear is not. Fear is just here with us in our conditional world. And so I thought it was interesting that he went right into the lower mentality part, saying, fear is the recognition of some power other than perfect love, which is what the God or the one, all one is. And that fear itself is a creative force, but it is a destructive force. That's what I'm saying. And so he said our freedom from this, our redemption from this, is getting redemption from the very root of fear. And that root is what I just said, the unbelief in the love of God, and the refusal to believe that love alone is the creating power behind all things. And I think that is true, that so many of us struggle with. We look at difficult things in the world, such as the crucifixion and other things like that, and we think, how could this be love, But so anyways, so they are saying that is the one thing and that there's no need for it. And if we got rid of it, it's an affirmation of the negative, which I thought was really funny. If we got rid of it, we would get rid of all of the problems that we suffer from. So the second thing that we created is limitations. So they don't even exist. So as perfect beings of this perfect divine intelligence, we don't need to be encumbered with fear and limitations and things like that. And we've completely just fabricated that in our own lives. And he says that we will cease the idea of limitations, believe the past. We talked about that, believing the past. I don't want to repeat anything because everyone's tired, but there's a misconception that spirit is a cosmic force without intelligence and that man originates the intelligence. And this was a big thing he went into with the personal versus the impersonal. which was that when we start trying to say that we put ourselves in the place of God, we are the intelligence and we are the ultimate power, that's when we're just creating so much trouble. And that, in fact, it couldn't possibly be true because there has to be this one intelligence, this unifying principle. Otherwise, literally, the human race would destroy itself, he said. Because we would all have competing desires. Like if we were the one force that could create, well, what I want to create is going to be different than what Melissa wants to create and Peggy wants to create, so we would end up just destroying ourselves. So there is this unifying principle underneath all of us. So I'll just really quick, I want to tell you two things I really loved. However, if the individual realizes true nature of source from which he is derived, the true nature of, if we got to this on a universal level, like individually, there are people who have gotten to this point. If we did it universally, we would literally be living in the kingdom of heaven on earth. So he goes so far as to say, like, look, you just get it. Like, if you get it, we'll all be living in heaven. It's like, whoa, that sounds amazing. Let's get it. And if we did, we would only create life, love, liberty as the divine mind. We would all be there. All evil would disappear from the world. And our individual consciousness wouldn't just be our individual consciousness anymore. They would expand infinitely. The promises laid out in this chapter were like, what? This is like amazing news. Okay, so the final part I want to touch on is something, I don't remember which chapter it was, but someone was talking about how within us, and I just want to touch on that because I really loved this part. Within us, the kingdom of heaven is within us. In our innermost place, there we find the eternal being of God. And this is the true meaning of worship. So there's a quote by Ernest Holmes, I can't remember right now, but it's essentially like that place inside of you that's never been touched. Right. And you can always go there. And I love that quote and I love that idea. And you can sort of see the source of it here when he's saying, if we find a way to get into that place and we really connect with it and stay connected with it, which is what the intention of worship is, then this is how we'll resolve all of that, the fear, the limitations, the duality, all of that. And this is my little heart next to it. He calls it worship in the temple of the innermost. Is that pretty beautiful? Yeah. Worship in the temple of the innermost. I thought that was pretty exciting. And that this is the true purpose of worship, is going inside and connecting with that one consciousness within us and realizing it's there and sort of bringing it out into the world. And I will end there because we're late. But there was this whole thing on death that I was like, whoa, just about us not really ever dying. And that if we really got to this place I was just talking about, death would also be eliminated because we would never die.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was, yeah, I got the best chapter. I was mad.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that wow, I'm telling you guys, woofed. I've been in a lot of classes here, and you probably agree. It's just
awesome.
Just so great that you made it really. Let me just go to the last one. There's nothing more. At least we're gonna. Oh, I do like this one. God will provide the food, but He will never cook the dinner. So he did have some humor. And then the last thing of him is Ernest Holmes discovered Troward's work in 1914, 2 years before Troward died. This is as near to my own thoughts as I shall ever come. Holmes began speaking on Troward's writing to growing groups when he was 25 without realizing his lifetime ministry had begun. He totally absorbed Troward's ideas and deeply linked them with his own thinking. Holmes was one of the main channels through which Troward's ideas reached American circles. So, don't you think so, Reverend Michelle? Okay, so here's the deal.
Hey, Reverend Michelle.
Thank you. And here's the other thing. What I loved about the last two is that it touched on his biblical part of him and how important that was to him. But the biggest thing I've gotten out of this is how much we have created. And it's not about beating ourselves up, but if we really got especially what I was hearing all through the night, if we really got that we created, because we couldn't understand the oneness, and they always say that the Spirit put us here in order to know itself, and to come back to that, the self knowing the self. So I think that this is exciting when you think of the fact of what we're really made of. And I really appreciate Troward tonight for, and you executed. I've never seen, first of all, Michelle just went through
the whole book in one
but,
night.
and you guys made it so exciting. And you're supposed to you're supposed to look at it and go, what the hell's that mean? That's how we learn. That's Troward. So anyway, let me get you out of here and let's just close.
No, we have to tell them next week, honey.
Okay.
Okay, so we're not going to do it as hard next week. Okay. All right. The first thing I want you to do, there's something, and I'm going to send this to you so you'll have it, but it's called the Radiant I Am, a meditation for self-healing. And it's a 25-minute meditation. I want you to do it. It's an Emma Curtis Hopkins meditation. I want you to do it at least 5 times before you go to bed or when you wake up in the morning. I would prefer if you did it every night or every day till we meet again. But just do that, and then I think what you're going to find. Actually, I'm not going to tell you what you're going to find. All right, every day or at least 5 times until we meet, and journal about it, and be ready to discuss your discoveries from doing this meditation. Okay, and then I want you to just read chapter 1. And write a thought paper on one of the statements by Emma that you most resonate with from this chapter, and be prepared to share it. And it will be collected. So we're only going to do chapter 1. We might extend it to some other chapters the next week. I'm going to just see how this goes. What you're going to find with Emma Curtis Hopkins is you're going to find the mysticism of our teaching. And yeah. So is anybody familiar with her yet? I know? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll learn about her next week. We'll also do a presentation on her, and then we'll discuss this stuff. So.
And thank you guys for bringing such life to Troward, because the one thing I don't know a lot about him is his biblical side, and and it kind of made me tonight in his additional work in there to see how he tied it all into like the first 10 chapters. So I want to kind of play with him, and I won't get into
do that next week.
No, I just no.
No, you can.
No, I'm just going to take a couple minutes to look over that one chapter.
Also have the following week.
Oh, that's true.
That we don't have a lot planned.
Right. So anyway, somewhere in our world we'll find that.
Yeah, but I'm going to send it to you so you'll get it.
She's going to send it to.
Radiant I Am into YouTube. Emma Curtis Hopkins. It'll come up.
Yeah.
You don't need to look at it. It's one of those, like, remember the Phineas Quimby mouth going up and down?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
not
very
meant to be looked
distracting
at.
if you look
It's meant to just listen to, all right?
So I'll do my no. Okay. So anyway, once again, thank you guys. Great evening. Give yourselves a hand. It was really wonderful. So let's just take a moment to just bathe in this whole energy that has been so wonderfully created through each and every one of us tonight. And I love that innermost wonderful place, that place where spirit is, where God is, where that power is always making itself known, and it is love. And what I know is that love leads the way, and the law makes it so. And so tonight I just am so grateful for what has transpired and for all of the stimulation. And I give a special thanks to Thomas Troward for all of the work that he put into his experience in his life in order to affect Ernest Holmes in such a way that now it is touching us all of these years later in the timelessness and spacelessness of the universal flow. So what I know for each and every one of us is that we go from this moment to the next moment to the next moment, even more aware than we were before we even walked in tonight. And that this is that divine moment that has never happened before and will never happen again in the same way. So I know peace, I know love, I know God moves through and as each one of us as our identity. And with that, I am so grateful. And until we meet again in this wonderful timeless and spacelessness and this transportation of our spiritual being anywhere we want to go, we could actually just transport ourselves home right here and right now. Maybe or maybe not. But what I do know is that love has made itself known here tonight. And I just release my word, knowing that our lives are perfectly demonstrated from the highest point of consciousness. as we let it go, as together we say. And so it is. Michelle, you didn't even have to pick up on.